Shark. The very word strikes fear in most people. Razor-toothed killers cruising the oceans, indiscriminately attacking humans. But out of the 350 known species, very few are dangerous to man. Nurse sharks vacuum food on the ocean floor. Basking sharks sieve food near the surface. Sharks come in all sizes and shapes. This is probably the strangest, with an eye and a nostril at each end of its hammer-shaped head. Some sharks are lone hunters. Others hunt in packs, like wolves. White-tip sharks spend most of the day sleeping, but when it's time to feed, they also join forces. It's ironic that giant whale sharks survive on a diet of tiny plankton. But even knowing most sharks are harmless, not many of us would choose to get in among them. However, some people specialize in it. Some years ago in the Bahamas, someone had the bright idea that feeding sharks would be a good bait for tourists, a new thrill for divers who'd seen it all. Those early feeds were quite primitive. Divers would form a small group on the seabed a few meters from the boat and wait until a bucket of fish was thrown off the stern. There was no denying the excitement level, with sharks and fish biting blindly in the frenzy. But the action was all over in a few moments, so they had to find a way to make the show last longer. Tying a rope to the bucket stretched the action a little. Even though it was an improvement, a clever shark could still spoil things by making off with the whole bucket load. Learning from others' experiments, the shark feeders of Walker's Key in the northern Bahamas came up with something more sophisticated. By putting offcuts from the local fisherman's catch in a bucket and freezing it, the chumsicle was born, a kind of giant lollipop of frozen fish stuck around a steel rod. As soon as the boat arrives on the reef, the divers descend to the bottom and wait. The noise of the engine acts like a call to dinner, and the sharks move in for the feed. The waiting divers betray their tension and excitement by gulping air. When the chumsicle hits the water, jackfish are the first to attack. In their excitement, they give out sound waves and vibrations that are picked up by the sharks, and the divers get a spectacular ringside view. Surprisingly, there's no real feeding frenzy. The shark circled the bait ball, apparently waiting in orderly fashion for their turn to feed. It's said that sharks are the most efficient predators there are. All their senses seem tailored to finding something to eat. They have an astonishing sense of smell, sensitive enough to pick up on a mere drop of blood in over 1,000 gallons of water. They hear and feel sound through a lateral line on their bodies, and they can also detect tiny electrical fields given off by their prey. Contrary to the Jaws theory, sharks don't make a habit of eating people, and these show no interest in the divers. Indeed, no tourist has ever been attacked since feeding started here. Things could get risky if a shark makes off with a big chunk and other fish rush after it. Deliberately putting food and people close together in shark-infested waters could be a nightmare. How safe it is depends on how carefully the food is offered to the sharks. On New Providence Island, divers can get much closer to the action thanks to a unique and carefully controlled feeding method. From just an arm's length away, tourist divers can admire streamlined Caribbean grey reef shark as big or bigger than themselves. Sheathed in chain mail, the feeder hands out bits of fish to one shark at a time. The bait is kept in a secured box and offered to the sharks on a steel skewer. Feeding sharks is a highly unusual occupation, but on Grand Bahama Island, there's a special training course in shark feeding for those who have the urge.
As a shark feeder, yeah, there's a lot of image of, yeah, this is really macho and it's only for guys. But when you go down there and you feed, it totally changes. The sharks are moving so slow, it's not really a struggle. It's more of an interaction with something, you know, a creature that you don't normally get to interact with. And there's so many myths surrounding sharks. You think that it's this fierce thing, but you get down there and you see they actually want affection. They'll come up to the feeder and they'll actually push themselves into your stomachs, and that's kind of their way of signaling us, yeah, we want to be stroked now and we want to be held. So the image of something ferocious is really not really that substantiated from my experience.
People come to the Bahamas and they want to do a shark dive. What we try and do is to get people as close as we can to sharks safely so that they can really appreciate what magnificent creatures they are. It's ironic, Peter Benchley did his first shark dives with us off Grand Bahama Island. And Peter Benchley was the one who wrote Jaws, which has probably put the fear of God into more people about sharks than any other single book and any other single occurrence.
If for any reason you decide that you do not...
There's always a full safety briefing before each dive. And if anyone's worried, now's the time to opt out, before heading for Shark Junction, 1 mile offshore in the open ocean.
Once I came to UNEXO, I came and started off as a safety diver. And as a safety diver, you just basically watch the feed. And about 5 months after being a safety diver, I got my training as a shark feeder. The more feeds you do, the closer you get to realizing what sharks are doing what. Now we started to realize that they pick up on our moods. They pick up on a feeder that's frightened right away. We give off fields and odors that the sharks pick up on. A shark diver who's nervous, and especially one who's doing it for the first couple of times, you'll notice the sharks will go right, will bump them in the head. Every feed I've been on is different. Some feeds are really nice and calm, and it seems like every second shark wants to be stroked. And other feeds, it's like all they want to have is to be fed.
It's hard to believe this is the creature we all know and fear. These feeding sessions have shown that the shark has a better side to its nature.
When you see our shark feeders at work, you've got to realize that they have been training for this for months. They've done hundreds of shark dives. They've done hours and hours and hours of instruction, and that's the reason that they make it look so easy. They're also extremely careful. A lot of people from TV stations were saying, boy, I'd really like to do that, to come down and feed sharks, to put on the chainmail suits and feed sharks, and we were very reluctant to start off with this. It's taken us about a year to develop a program which we feel that can enable somebody to enjoy the experience, but most importantly to do it safely.
Added this corrugated
Instruction is on a one-to-one basis. With over 20 years diving experience, John has decided he wants to learn how to feed sharks. On day one of the course, his first step is to get acquainted with the modified diving equipment.
This comes over the shoulder. Your primary will now come under your arm, keeping it again close to your body.
The whole unit is tailored for safety. Some air hoses have been shortened to stop sharks getting caught.
And you're streamlined, and it's still comfortable.
Others have been sheathed in aluminium to protect against shark bites. The feeder is protected from the shark's teeth by a full chainmail suit. But for the pioneers of shark feeding, it was a different story.
When we were first going into the water without our full shark suits on, it was very gladiatorial. We had shark sticks, we were fending the sharks away most of the time and trying to protect the feeder. We had a few nips and scrapes, and so we found a company in California that makes what they term as marine protection suits. And we found that these work very well. They weigh about 35 pounds. They're made up of individual steel links. They cost about $9,000 a piece, and we have 4 of them for safety reasons. And when you wear them, you feel like a knight in medieval armor. It's amazing to think that we go back several hundred years and we find we're wearing exactly the same things to protect ourselves as the knights of old did. So it's really quite amusing.
One of the things that you want to avoid is having a lot of the chainmail hanging down below the tip of your finger, because that will allow sharks' teeth to get caught in that.
And that, of course, could lead to what Ollie calls an accidental bite situation. John's suit of armor will give him almost 100% protection against serious bites. But Ollie's experience will also protect him. Over the years, he and his fellow feeders have learned how to stay safe in the company of sharks.
We've learned a lot by trial and error. We've had feeders get bitten, and to varying degrees, from a few stitches here to one of our feeders lost a part of his arm. So we've paid our dues to learn along the way, but all in all, we think it was worth it, and what we've come up with now is a very, very safe encounter with sharks. Safe for us as the people conducting it, and also safe for the people that are watching it. So it's worked out pretty well, but it's been a long road.
Now comes the watery part of John's training. He may feel like a clumsy heavyweight here, but once underwater in the training pool, his suit won't weigh him down so much. He'll have a chance to get used to its strange feel and to practice his shark feeding routine before he meets the real thing. The pool is like a giant aquarium, over 7 meters deep and 10 meters square. Once he's begun to get the feel of his steel suit, Ollie takes him through a vital exercise. He makes John take off his fins, because out at sea, he must have his feet as free as possible to sidestep over-enthusiastic sharks. Walking in 15 kilos of stainless steel takes some practice, and John moves like a lunar astronaut. It's vital that he stay as calm as he can when he's with the sharks.
If the feeder gets really excited and is really, really nervous, so the sharks can pick that up. Now, don't ask me how or why, but the sharks actually pick that up and they can react and respond to it. The calmer you are, the more settled you are. As a rule, if everything else falls into place, an outer corridor and all the rest of it, you can have a very calm, relaxed dive. But if you're really excited and the environmental conditions aren't ideal and you get bait stolen, I mean, it can become chaos very, very quickly.
As sharks are quick to sense panic or nervousness, it's vital to practice actions like calmly finding the spare regulator if a shark punctures an air hose. One of the first things any diver learns is how to clear a face mask. If an excited or aggressive shark knocks the feeder's mask off, then they mustn't put it on again with the feeding hand. That would create an area of fish odor and could lead to sharks and fish targeting the face, the only part of the body not protected by the chainmail. Ollie now plays the role of a shark coming in to take bait. This is to give John an idea of what to expect when feeding for real.
Once the sharks have made a bite decision, then the bite is usually fierce. It will come up, and once that decision has been made, it's looking to take out a piece of meat. So they go through different patterns of behavior as they approach you, and you can see that coming. That will help you anticipate when to feed, when not to feed, and just getting a feel for the shark's swimming patterns and behavior in relation to biting to help us anticipate when to feed and when not to feed.
When the shark feeds first started, fish scraps were used as bait, but now they import Canadian herring, an oily fish with a strong scent.
We actually use scent then too to control the dive and the behavior and the feeding pattern of the sharks, because as the odor comes out of the container, the little bits that do, if there's a current on the dive, it will be picked up by the current and will drift down current. And what you'll find is that the sharks, as they get closer and more of their stimuli become effective, you'll see that their behavior changes drastically. You have to remember that some of these sharks are big gals out there. The largest ones are females, and the largest is probably about 8 foot and 500 plus pounds. So they're big, and they have a lot of power, especially if they start thrashing. So control is the key, controlling ourselves, our own emotions, and controlling the food source. Your first dive is going to be an experience where you just have to sit there and experience it, because there's so many emotions and so many things that will be going on.
As they reach the dive site, John replays Ollie's words in his head.
The reason that I like to start you off in this strike zone is so that your arms are still close to your body. They're not overextended, so that if for some reason something goes wrong and you get bitten, your arm's close to you and you can pull it back in as opposed to being extended. Remember, you don't have to feed just because you've identified a shark in the distance. If it comes in and it changes its speed, it picks up speed and it's coming too fast, you're not committed to feed. You'll find that sharks may come from other directions and make that shark change course. Well, you're not committed to feed. It's well worth your while on the first dive to wait and just be patient and wait for that right time.
This is the loneliest moment you can imagine. After all the training and theory, it's just Ollie and myself, alone in the open ocean, with the sharks. With no backup and no safety divers, we'll have to rely totally on each other. The instant Ollie handed over the feeding tube, the yellowtails and Jack surrounded me. It was almost claustrophobic. There was a moment when I froze and thought, oh my God, what am I doing holding a tube of oily fish? I felt like shark bait for a pack of hungry shark. Yet there was no frenzy. They didn't attack, but they could sense my hesitation, and I knew I had to go for it. And after that first tentative feed to the first shark, the fear evaporated.
When you're feeding sharks, if you lose control for a moment, they can become like a pack of wild dogs. If you start to get nervous and lose a little control, they will sense it immediately and knock you down. There's no question about it. You just stop, take a breath, look them right in the eye, literally look them right in the eye, and the action slows right down.
This dive was one of the most awesome experiences. It totally changed my perception of shark. We slaughter millions of these creatures every year. Many shark populations are on the brink of extinction. After this encounter, I am convinced we should be trying to understand and protect sharks rather than hunting and fearing them.
Shark watching pours thousands of dollars a day into the Bahamas tourist industry. Yet these sharks aren't protected. There's nothing to stop them being fished out.
It's a little disturbing when we see the big game fishing boats out here that are deliberately going out to fish for sharks. Shark meat is okay to eat, it's nothing special, but most of the time it's for the fight, and a lot of the times it's just to cut the fins off and then throw the carcass back into the water, or to cut the jaw out, which is such a dreadful waste of a wonderful animal. I mean, when you think that our 25 odd sharks out in the ocean that we visit regularly, we probably entertain 5,000 or 6,000 scuba divers a year that specifically come to town to see our sharks. So, I mean, first of all, from an economical point of view, look what it does for our economy. But secondly, we've got 20 or 25 sharks out there that are educating people and to the magnificence of these animals. And it just is such a terrible waste to see an animal that's maybe 20 or 30 years old to be fished out just to give somebody a half hour of pleasure in a fishing afternoon.
Increasingly, people are turning against killing for sport and come to the Bahamas for the pleasure of watching sharks and other sea creatures, rather than killing them.
We have our dolphin dive, where we take scuba divers out in the open ocean to interact with dolphins on the medium reef. And people come back with a whole new respect for dolphins. They come back with a whole new respect for the overall ecosystem, because that's part of our message when we're introducing people to dolphins for the first time. By bringing the shark program in as well, it has really broadened the spectrum, because everybody always has looked at that the dolphins represent everything that is good in the ocean, and the sharks represent everything that's bad in the ocean. And what we've tried to do is to bring these two animals closer together, just to show that one is just as important as the other one. If one came back from a fishing trip and you got an Atlantic bottlenose dolphin, people would be horrified. We're hoping that people are going to soon be horrified when they see people come back from a fishing trip with a large shark as a trophy.
Not everyone approves of shark and dolphin feeding programs. UNEXO's team justify theirs by saying people can learn more about these animals through close contact with them.
In spite of the fact that we really live with these sharks every day, the dive instructors of UNEXO see sharks on most dives. We do a shark dive and sometimes two shark dives every single day. We live with them every day. We still know very little about sharks.
Those who've entered the shark's world have stepped onto unfamiliar and fascinating ground, where prejudices about bloodthirsty killers are overturned. Perhaps the most extraordinary behavior these people will have seen is something we equate more with other animals, our fellow mammals, particularly our pets at home. The sight of sharks lulled into a kind of trance, letting themselves be held and stroked, and appearing to seek human contact. Is this really the dreaded killer of the seas? As feeder and sharks go through what is almost an underwater ballet, the audience can see the animals break the streamlined symmetry of their bodies when they dislocate and distend their jaws to swallow fish. As long as humans respect sharks and take the right precautions, these encounters present very little danger. Even when a shark accidentally takes the hand in with the food, the feeder doesn't snatch it back, but just pushes it further into the shark's mouth, making it gag and spit it out. These divers have observed sharks apparently following clear rules of behavior, queuing up to feed, reacting with intelligence and acute sensitivity to the feeder's slightest actions and moves. What must they feel now as they watch an experienced feeder virtually playing with the sharks, tantalizing them with morsels of herring, controlling their movements, and being in command of potentially lethal creatures? Most of these people probably went down with more than a little trepidation.
When we can take someone down there and let them see a shark swim in the ocean and get across to them that this shark isn't just going to come up and eat them for no reason, let them see really the magnificence of the animal in its own environment. If we can somehow humanize that shark to the individual and heighten people's awareness and say, look, you know, these are an important part of our food chain, and we can't just go out and indiscriminately wipe them out. We will ultimately be the ones to suffer from it.
Sharks will probably never shake off their sinister image. These shows may help us towards a better understanding of them, and that might stop us wiping them out through fear, greed, and ignorance.